looking
Here we are.
Aspects. So,
Take it away, Ant.
And tell us when you're ready.
DJ Rob. All right, guys, welcome back to the All Things Aged Care Weekly Wrap-Up. My name is Anthony Nguyen, aged care recruitment expert and host of the Pioneers in Aged Care podcast. I'm currently recruiting for several clinical and leadership roles. So if you're a nurse practitioner or clinical manager, please get in touch urgently. Next, we have Robert Covino, founder and CEO of Mellors Australia. He led the creation of technologies like Mellors Metrics and Care Minute Manager, and now Mellors Plus, an AI-powered platform uniting software and data to streamline everything from admissions to compliance. Rounding out our hosting crew is Owen Matheson, strategic connector and founder of Mission Critical Group. He works with owners, boards, and executives with a knack for connecting the right people, opportunities, and capital to unlock growth and drive innovation. Our special guest for today, we are excited to have the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of one of Australia's best private aged care providers, consisting of residential aged care, home care services, day therapy, day respite, and retirement living across Australia. She recently announced that she is moving on from the sector, and it recently came to light that she will be joining InvoCare as their Managing Director, CEO, Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore. A huge job, sort of related to the sector she's in now. So this stream will be showing her some love and reflecting on her time in the sector, and sending on a few messages from people that she's touched and influenced along the way. Ladies and gentlemen, please raise the roof for Linda Mellors.
Welcome, Linda, on this Friday afternoon, and thank you for committing to this program. Just as Ant said, you joined a company mid-Royal Commission. You led it through a global pandemic. You navigated the most significant regulatory overhaul in the Australian aged care history since it was founded as a sector, and you did it all while managing 9,000 plus personnel and workforce and an ASX listing that was being publicly vilified at the time. So you can see we're going to have a lot of great discussion around this, because I think this is one of the most important voices we have in the sector. So I think
we don't have to hold back anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I'm on the therapist's couch already.
Yeah, make yourself comfortable, Linda.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I guess part of what I'm thinking is, well, who were you before this? What can we learn, and how do we find more leaders that can, take on this within the sector, but also support those? And I guess, firstly, let's talk a little bit more about your background. You grew up as one of 4 daughters, I understand, and you valued education, which led you all the way to a doctorate in cardiac physiology and a BS with first class honors. I guess talk a little about that passion, and where did that come from, and where did that ultimately lead you to Regis?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's lovely to be with you all. So I am daughter number 3. That's my official title. Still with my dad. He still calls me daughter number 3. I've tried to train him to say favourite daughter, but daughter number 3 it is for now. So like many immigrant stories, my parents came to Australia with nothing. Had 4 daughters, and saw the pathway was clearly through education. So it's such a common story, and we were all very heavily supported to pursue whatever we wanted to do. I probably had particular strengths in maths, so I ended up getting a scholarship to high school off the back of maths, and then had no idea what to do. I was one of those people with no clear direction. My 3 sisters all knew exactly what they wanted to do, and they all went on and did it, and I didn't know. So I did arts and science at uni, kept it really broad, and then someone said you should do honours. I had nothing better to do, so I did that. And it was the same thing with the PhD. Yeah, why don't you do a PhD? Sure, I've got nothing else to do. And a $17,000 tax-free scholarship was pretty appealing back then. But I did get to the end of 9 years of full-time university and recognised that actually it's not what I wanted to do at all, and I wasn't suited to an isolating, highly repetitive kind of job. I like people. I needed to be out with people, and I need a lot going on. I am one of those people. I'm no good if I've got time. I can eat my
It's
own
a
brain
safe
out.
place, Linda. We are those
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, I can feel the safety. So I knew I needed to do something else. And it was actually a girlfriend who's a clinician who said to me, you should go and run hospitals. So I moved into the hospital sector.
Yes.
Yeah, and then found my way into aged care right at the end of that journey.
Wow.
Tell us
okay.
about the beginnings of why hospitals and what you thought hospitals would be, vis what it turned out to be.
Yeah, it's a good question. So hospitals, because I'd come from a medical research background, I still loved the research and innovation and improvement. I just didn't want to do it. In terms of that repetitive research, and I definitely didn't want to be a clinician. I knew that as well. So it took me a while, but I worked out I'm better working on a system that I do have good skills around systems thinking and being able to see things that other people couldn't necessarily see. So I started off in business development and strategy, and then became the company secretary. And I did all of the CEO's work. So I was almost immediately at all of the board meetings and writing papers for boards and working with directors and executives. So I went in the opposite direction that most people go in. I did operations after I had actually done strategy and governance for years.
That is interesting, because you would have been reverse engineering what you knew at a board level was important.
That's right. And so I think then, like, what did I actually know about hospitals before I got there? Very little. Very, very little.
So at 35, you were CEO, you had a PhD, you were raising three children. And you have said on record that you've challenged many people. What does that actually mean? Who pushed back and how did you handle it? Were they just the children or were they a little bit wider than that?
No, the kids are awesome. So I've got, so my kids are now 20. I've got one turning 18 week after next, and the little one's 16. So they're awesome, and they are functional human beings. I haven't broken
Love
them,
that.
which is
Well done.
I set a low bar for parenting. They are okay and they're functional. But, and we do work in a highly feminised sector. So what I'm about to say will be common to so many people who are like me. How can you possibly have a job like this with children? What's going to happen to your children? Will they be, completely neglected? Will you be completely distracted? And, it's that whole I can walk and chew gum. It's really, it's amazing. We all do more than one thing at a time.
That's it. And nothing like a good coordination challenge, Linda.
Exactly. So but you get a lot of pushback, a lot.
No.
Tell us, are your children number 1, 2, and 3, or have you adopted a different naming approach?
So I go for who's my favourite child.
Right.
The two boys always put their hands up while my daughter sits in quiet satisfaction. So my daughter is my favourite daughter, and then I've got a favourite youngest one. And the favourite middle.
You're very good at walking the diplomatic line, Linda. There's no doubt about it. Can I ask you, and Rob, I really want to jump in with your background as well. I know that you started in aged care with a background in hospitals and process mapping. So for you and Linda to...
Oh, we've lost Owen.
We've lost Owen.
Absolutely. I guess where I was looking at it too, the same way, Linda, is that the decision. Why aged care? I mean, why the hardest room in the building that you decided to walk through? And you've noted, you were hooked after taking on the Mercy Health's aged care portfolio.
Hi, Linda. Sorry.
That's all right, Owen. Rob has finished your question, so I'll go ahead and answer. So I didn't know aged care was this hard. That's the first thing that I would say. And I would suggest to you that the vast majority of people who work in hospitals have no idea how hard aged care is. And to be frank, aged care shouldn't be as hard as it is. So that's something we need to keep advocating for, is to actually make this a better system for the people who work in it, as well as the people who are receiving the care and services. So I had been in hospitals, it was probably close to 20 years in the end, and I'd been the CEO of the hospital side at Mercy, and there was another CEO of the aged care side. And we all sat on the national executive for the group. So I'd watched what was going on in aged care, and I think I had one opinion too many about what was going on, and they asked me if I would take on the aged care portfolio, but I wasn't ready to leave the hospital portfolio. So in a fabulous decision, I said I'd do both. And so I did both CEO jobs for 12 months. Wow. And then you can't unsee aged care. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And I felt I could actually step out of hospitals at that point, and there would be a long queue of people who could fill my spot. Aged care really felt like it needed help. It was being demonised in ways that hospitals just are not. I still remember at the beginning of the Royal Commission, and we were providing the data when I was still at Mercy, and there was all this outrage about some of the incident rates, and I was sitting there with my hospital hat saying, if I had incident rates like this in hospitals, I'd be doing cartwheels down the corridors, right? Wow. This is amazing. So I found the difference in expectations between hospitals and aged care shocking, outrageous, less resourced but higher expectations, an expectation of perfection rather than excellence. And I think just generally, everything that you know about clinical governance, quality and safety and improvement in hospitals didn't apply in aged care. And I found that really worrying, because it felt like the kinds of conversations that we'd been having in hospitals 15 or 20 years before.
No, I want to give a shout out to Daniel Atchison. I had coffee with him earlier today, actually, and I said, you're coming on the show. And he said, I love Linda, because when she came into the sector with her outside the box ideas, is exactly what we needed. And she's not afraid to ask the hard question. She's not afraid to let people know and put them in uncomfortable conversations for the betterment of the sector. So a big fan. I want to give him a big shout out, because
he's awesome. I love Dan too. Yeah.
It's been quite great seeing that, because I had a similar experience coming into the sector as well. I got hooked working for one of the big four and doing patient journey, more hospital efficiency, but big four, you have to do everything because the market's not large enough. But they rolled me in to be the aged care expert. Like, I've done some process mapping and efficiency design for hospitals, but I fell in love with it, and it was on the back of setting up this group, Domain and Principal, which then became now Opal. So it was an amazing time for 9 months, and also watching a new funding model come in the middle of it, and how really little prepared the sector was for something that monumental of a transformation. And I think I resonate with that workforce, and I hear some of your language about the workforce has been demonized, and there are other elements, and I think it's quite unfair, but that's also what I saw as opportunity, what I could fix. And I love the speed in which our clients in the industry would really put the changes into effect. But I guess, what does it feel like to watch people you lead and be publicly shamed for the work they do? Because that really hit me hard, and that's really part of the why I committed and passionate about making aged care better.
Yeah, same. I found it deeply distressing watching people be demonised, particularly during the Royal Commission and COVID. The people who work in aged care are, by and large, salt of the earth, fabulous human beings who turn up to work to make somebody's day the best it can possibly be. You'd be very hard pressed to go and find better humans. So to watch people like that be put down by people who should have known better. And that was one of the things that really upset me, was the people who had public platforms knew better than to say the things that they were saying. And they gave people permission to behave really, really badly at a time when, you know, for those of us who'd come out of hospitals, we'd done so much work around psychological safety, and eliminating or reducing as best we could violence and aggression in the workplace. And suddenly in aged care, we've got people with public platforms giving permission for people to go and abuse aged care workers. It was appalling behaviour. So I felt that there was something I could definitely add there. And I also felt that if aged care was filled with male residents and male workers, it would never have been allowed to get to the position it was. So, you know, the funding squeeze, the very, very low pay rates for the people who worked in the sector, it was appalling from a systems perspective. So I think being able to come in and say, actually, the people who work in aged care should be paid more. So how can we actually work as a collective with the employee representative bodies as well as government to get through higher pay rates? So to me, that was really, really important. And residents and clients get better care when they're served by people who are actually paid properly. They don't have to work 3 jobs. Retention's better, so you don't have all of the turnover. So again, if you bring a systems lens to it, it actually all makes sense. And from an economic basis as well, you can make a very, very solid argument.
Absolutely. I think we are doing ourselves a disservice to those with how fragmented this, this regulated industry, that we all have to operate in, but we have all of these different ways of working and systems and inputs, and the staff are working probably across 5 different providers at the same time. And I mean, even just look at resident agreements and having one, looking for how we support our, children to buy a house. Imagine going out and having a different agreement for every house that we look at. It's just, to me, it feels mad. And I guess I'm coming at it a little bit more of an outsider growing up in the States. And, I've been in here 20 years young, still working on my Australian, but, getting there. But I've really fell and also have come from a family of teachers and nurses that I really get the empathy, the passion, and to really do good. But I feel a lot of times the sectors and the structure of it is also letting us down in that same front. So my question, I guess, as I go, and it's like really leading what you led through this crisis, and also the publicity and the pressure that you would have to go through. You've led Regis through the Royal Commission, as we discussed, bushfires, which I think, and floods, which a lot of these acts of God in many kind of part and part have passed by, but then COVID-19 hit, and then of course the start of the reforms at the ANAC funding transition. It's been a complete legislative overhaul of the sector in that period. So if you had to rank, those by just the psychological toll they would have on you, but also some of your key team members. I mean, I wanted to go there and like, what did that list look like for the execs of the provider of that size?
And, one of the things I've been reflecting on as I've been talking to people as I'm, about to exit the sector, the people who are most deeply affected by those kinds of events are those with great doses of empathy, along with their other leadership attributes. Those with huge doses of empathy are also the ones who are going to bear the psychological toll and the risk of burnout. So if we've got a system that is set up in that way, what does the system look like in the end if we don't make the adjustments to it to make it an easier system to work in? So, of course, we want to preserve the best of resident and client safety and experience, but we don't actually need to make it as hard as it is for the workforce and the leaders in the sector. So, I kind of sit here and say, so who survives the sector? Do we end up with people with no empathy if we're burning out the ones who do have empathy? And I think that's a real problem and something that we need to talk about, because empathy is also linked to better commercial outcomes, better resident experience. So I think there's a real conversation that we need to have, again, at a system level. How do we protect the leaders in this sector? I look at my colleagues and, again, they are excellent people. People who take leadership roles in aged care, they are excellent people. Have there been bad players? Absolutely, there have, but they are nowhere near the majority. But one of the things I find in aged care that's really different to other sort of health and social sectors is one thing happens in aged care and it is generalised to the whole sector. One thing happens in hospitals and one thing has happened in a hospital. It's not generalised. But I think leaders in this sector have shown the most extraordinary resilience and courage. And we want that, and we need to foster it and protect those leaders.
I agree. Can agree more as well, and continue to mentor those leaders through it. And I'm glad you touched on that, because like one of the follow-up questions I had was, what's the one thing about aged care you wish the Australian public, actually understood about that? You touched on generalization in that side. So is that where would you go with that response?
I know you've got Kevin who'll come on in a while.
Yes.
But if you talk to people like Kevin and if you look at the data, people who have experience in the system, so residents and families and visitors to aged care, have a far, far better view of it than people who don't, who might remember what it was like 20 or 30 years ago. They don't know what it's like today, and they have a view of the people who work in the sector as being uncaring. And I think what I wish people knew is what actually happens in the residential aged care homes and in home care and the other bits of our service system, where there are beautiful people providing beautiful care day in and day out. And you look at the way that providers, turn themselves inside out to meet the preferences of the people in care. It far exceeds anything you'll see in any other part of, again, the health and social sector. But people don't know that, and the media's not as interested in good stories from aged care. And then you've got an ageism element, where we should be doing much more around, look at these extraordinary people and what they've contributed to Australia or elsewhere, and what can we learn from them? We need more respect for the wisdom and the history.
That's great. And one of the things sorry, Ant?
I'll just jump in here, Linda. I wanted to ask as well, like when Robert described all those scenarios, all those events that could have really, at the minimum, kept you up at night. You've managed to find time to help the little guy as well, and you've managed to. And I'm saying this because there's the fellow by the name of Corey Fraser, and he sent me a video saying, "Hi Anthony, love your podcast. I'm learning about the industry and I'm really connected to it. And this is what I'm building for the sector. And your podcast has helped me educate myself on who's who in the industry. And I've reached out to a few of them, and they've taken a meeting with me. And when I called him and I said, "Who took a meeting with you?" He said, "Linda Mellors." So he described himself as, in the same way I describe myself, as a relative nobody. And by you giving us your time, you've been very generous with your time to the little guy. And amongst all the issues in aged care, you haven't forgotten people from at all levels. Where did that come from?
Suspect family, the way I was brought up. You take people as they come, and if someone's got a good idea or they're doing something great, I don't particularly care what role they hold. I'm always happy to have a conversation. And there are some things also that just catch your eye. And you can imagine how many requests I get for meetings, and I don't take a lot of them. But I still remember seeing Corey's and the way he approached it. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, I'll meet with you. I can see you trying to do something good. And if I can help, then I'm really happy to.
Yeah. Well, on behalf of the little guys, thank you.
I don't think you can say you're a little guy anymore.
Well, I was. It's been a journey, but at the time, people like yourself would give me the time of day and let me put my face next to yours, and I guess through the light is reflected off you and back onto us. So thank you for that. I'll let you get back to your question, Rob.
No, I love those. I love those human stories that really come out, behind a lot of these great people that don't really get showcased quite a bit, especially when you're in roles like you and Dan and many other execs out there. But I also feel if there's, I guess, thinking back, and you've had a lot of reflection, it sounds like, on that journey, especially as you had to make the decision, ultimately what you made. But is there one thing you wish you knew at the beginning that you now, on that reflection, know now?
Yeah, so certainly coming into aged care, there's a whole lot of stuff I wish that I'd known at the beginning. And one of my community services, when somebody comes into aged care and they're not from our sector, I go out of my way to have a coffee and just say, here are the things that I wish somebody had told me when I first came into the sector. Because this sector does operate very differently. And I think particularly if you've come from somewhere like health, the kinds of conversations that you could have and that were perfectly safe and appropriate and encouraged to have were actually not okay in aged care. And that was, I think that's a real worry. And we need to be better than that. Again, at a system level, we need to be more sophisticated. We need to listen to more of the dissenting voices, and we need to listen far more to providers who are actually closest to the residents and the clients. So the way that some elements of the system pit providers against residents and clients, it's utter madness. Any of us could be in a different kind of business. Our businesses are caring for older people and their families. That is what we're here for. So I think I wish somebody had told me about the differences in understanding and maturity around clinical governance and continuous improvement. I think they were probably the main ones. I was not at all prepared for the regulatory sort of settings that I walked into.
Well, if you're the next generation of aged care CEOs listening to this, please take note of that, because I agree wholeheartedly. And I think before we open up to the floor, probably one of the last things I wanted to ask you about that I know comes up quite often with a lot of being a vendor and data led. Technology is changing everything. I mean, I think we're seeing this and reading about it every day: AI, robotics, data driven care. But what excites you, and what really starting to frighten you about what's coming for healthcare and broader, specifically aged care?
Yeah, so lots of things excite me. So in the time I've been at Regis, we've invested really heavily: hardware, software, BI, AI, and we've just got so much more information now at our fingertips to enable good decision making and better care. So I think that's really exciting. One of the things I really missed when I left the hospital sector was the collegiality around data and improvement, and being able to rank yourself against other providers and learn from those who are doing things better than you. So one of the things I'm very excited about is the work that Ageing Australia is doing to put together an aged care roundtable, like the health roundtable that we or that hospitals still have. So I think that's really exciting. I think there are still some data integrity issues that our sector needs to really advocate for improvement. So when I think about the quality indicators that providers are assessed against, again, the settings are so different from hospitals. In hospitals, the things that were counted against me or the hospital were things that had happened on my watch. So in aged care, I still cannot make sense of things like pressure injuries being counted regardless of source. It's a perverse disincentive for providers to take particular residents. It makes no sense at all. And from an improvement perspective, if you think about it from a governance and improvement perspective, we need to be focused on improving the things that are within our control. We should have knowledge about the things that happen that are out of our control, but the improvement effort should be the stuff that's within our control. So I find that sort of stuff really frustrating. And I've been here coming up 7 years, and I aged care at Mercy for a year before that. So, I sort of sit here and say I've been having that same discussion for 8 years.
Yeah.
And still having it, that's not acceptable. And at what point does the provider voice actually garner more respect? Because we do want to improve, but it's very hard to run those big improvement programs and be able to demonstrate result if you've got a whole lot of stuff counting against you that shouldn't. And we hear providers say, I'm not going to take residents with complex wounds. I'm not going to take residents with complex behaviours. The last thing in the world you want is a provider that says, I'm not going to send a resident to hospital because it counts against me from a quality perspective. If a resident needs to go to hospital, they need to go to hospital. Exactly. So I still don't think that we've got the settings quite right in terms of what we measure and how it's understood.
Couldn't agree with you more on that front.
And this episode was all about reflecting on your time in the sector, Linda. So we reflected on the frustrations and the issues. What about the moments of joy, moments of laughter, any stories around that, things that have made you cry, and what will you miss?
Yeah, I've laughed, I've cried, I've done all of those things. And it's often when you're actually out sharing a meal with residents and, you love the older people who don't really care about what's proper anymore, and they just say stuff that is outrageous and hilarious, and I will be crying with, joyful tears. I've really, really enjoyed that. And then you sit with a resident who's recently lost their life partner of 60 or 70 years, and, it's so hard, so hard, and that makes you cry with them sometimes as well. And I think for families, we encounter a lot of families who were really struggling with care responsibilities, and having somebody take that over so that they can go back to being a family member, that's really very, very special. So I think the things I will miss the people in aged care. So I'll miss the residents, the families, the clients. I'll miss the staff. Like, again, you just can't find better human beings. So I'll miss all of those things. Yeah.
Well, we're going to bring Kevin McCreaton to the stage now. Kevin, for those who haven't met you before, you were on the show before, but for those who haven't met you, give us a little intro, and then, the stage is yours to ask questions and give your comments.
Thank you very much. We'll try not to be too greedy. I could, chat with Linda all day. For those that don't know me, I run the Catalyst Report. The 3 core products are surveys we do at the beginning of the year on home care / supported home, in the middle of the year on retirement living, and at the end of the year on residential aged care. To give you an idea of the scope of that, last year we had about 32,000 survey respondents. So I think we've got a really good handle on what consumers think. I do love getting the voice of the customer and representing the consumer perspective. Someone once said I had better data than the government. And look, it's just picking up on something Linda said earlier. one of the frustrations I have as the keeper of the keys is the knowledge that a lot of Australians think that aged care providers are making a lot of money, and that aged care in Australia is not well run. I'll just pull a statistic out for you. So the last Catalyst report on residential aged care, firstly looking at Australia, 22% of Australia rates the quality of aged care as 8, 9 or 10 out of 10, 22%, and that's up from 18% the year before. Whereas 74% of people like me, where dad's in aged care, rates aged care as 8, 9 or 10 out of 10. So I'm so grateful for the angels who look after mum and dad in Adventist Care Wahroonga, particularly as I'm in Western Australia, 4,000 kilometres away. And as Linda said, the media don't take the time to tell the good news stories, and it's if it bleeds, it leads. So I'm sure those stories from the Royal Commission, from COVID, etc., resonated a while, but we are seeing the overall negative perception tilt downwards. I've been tracking that for 4 or 5 years, but we've still only got 22% of Australians generally thinking Resi's any good. And I'm about to get that stat for supported home, which we know has spluttered into existence and is stumbling along, and I'm going to document how that's going. Anyway, so that's me, and that's a little intro. But over to Linda. Linda, congratulations on your stellar career. There's a lot of love in the room for you here and across the industry generally. You will be missed. So I'll just get that out of the way. When we last met at the Gold Coast at the Aging Australia conference, I was ready to ask questions of Sam Ray, and he bolted. He didn't take questions, but people like yourself and Darren Burbank, etc., got to speak with him. How robust are questions and issues you can put to the minister? Do they, does the lawmakers and bureaucracy listen and take note? And what related to that, what needs to happen for providers and investors get behind bed building? Because I'm not seeing it happen quickly.
Yeah, great questions, Kevin. So I think so Sam Ray, newish minister. So we did have a really robust conversation with him off to the side of that Aging Australia conference. So a good group of providers and extraordinary consistency in terms of the feedback that was provided. What I really like about Sam Ray is he does listen, and if he doesn't understand something, he stops you and says, I don't understand, or I don't know about that, I haven't heard about that before, explain that to me. So I think just that kind of active listening and seeking to understand properly is great for our sector. And I think we would all say we want, a minister for aged care. We want a minister who is proud to stand up and say, Australia's got the best aged care system in the world. Mm-hmm. And we know that a whole lot of other countries look to Australia. They look to our aged care system because they do think that our system is better. So I think Sam is he's really coming up to speed with aged care. He goes out, he visits the home, he is talking to sector leaders, he is talking to consumers. The big barrier I think that the sector has is with the new Aged Care Act and the strengthened standards, there was a bit of messaging around it's been fixed now. So, everyone can move on, and it's not fixed. The sector is not fixed. And as you quite rightly point out, we are not building the beds that the sector needs. So I think, one of the things I've been saying is residential aged care is full. We're at capacity, and we had, I think, 880 net new beds built last year when we needed about 10,000. I don't think the number's going to be wildly different this year. And this year we really needed 20,000. Support at home is looking pretty overwhelmed, and obviously there are some pretty significant structural issues there that are being discussed really broadly at the moment. We've got a housing crisis as well. So are we about to enter an era where older people in Australia start dying at home with no care or service? That's my question, right? And I think that this is beyond urgent. Sure. And every single day that it's not addressed, the problem compounds. So my understanding is we've had about 20,000 people a year turn 85 over recent years. With the baby boomers, it moves to 60,000, and for a few years it goes up to 80,000 people. So what happens when a big chunk of those people can't get care or service when and where they need it? Someone will probably drop out of the workforce to look after them. That someone will be disproportionately women, and usually women at the peak of their earning capacity when you look at the age that people drop out of the workforce. If you have fewer people in the workforce, it lowers the tax revenue base for government to be able to spend on things. That kind of stress and pressure on individuals and families, it's going to be huge. The moral distress for people working in the sector is going to be huge. And if you sort of extend that then to the political spectrum, this will impact every electorate in the country. Imagine how angry the general population is going to be when they can't access services when and where they need them. And I think we've, as we've been going through these processes over the past few years, I think we've given people some false choices. So, if you look at something like the RAD retention as an example, so do you want a 2% or a 3% RAD retention? It's a pretty simplistic question to ask. If we'd asked the proper question, which is, would you like a 2% RAD retention and the risk that you will not be able to get care and support at the time you need it, or a 3 or 4% RAD retention that will allow the sector to be profitable and build more, and you will get care and service when and where you need it? That was the real question, not do you want it to be 3 or 2? And there is still a sense, when you go out and talk to people, there is still a sense that providers are making wild amounts of money when the reality is you've still got half of the sector unviable. We need to be having better conversations.
So what policy settings need to occur to get beds getting built?
Yeah, so, I think, the changes that were made to ANAC last year really hurt the sector because the messages that we had heard was that government was going to improve viability and profitability, but actually the sector went backwards in terms of profitability in FY26. So ANAC, in aged care, there is an ideology that you should not be able to make a margin on care funding. That doesn't exist in private hospitals or pharmacy or diagnostics. It doesn't exist in any other part of the system but ours, which doesn't make sense to me. And then most providers are still losing money on everyday living and accommodation. So you can't have zero margin on the biggest part of funding, which is care, and most providers losing money on your other two revenue streams. And then health, I think you're probably hearing an awful lot about how difficult health is to implement, and that is also going to impact the sector. So I think we need better funding settings so that a good provider can make a reasonable margin and a great provider will make a higher margin and build more. And we're nowhere near there at the moment.
Hey, Kevin, feel free to stay on. I just want to give the floor to a few of our listeners and watchers out there. I'm going to read all the questions, and then, Linda, you can tackle whichever one you feel like you want to get into. I don't know. Oh, we still got time. We still got 15 minutes. First one is from Kim Davis. As a provider, I'll put that on. Is that on? as a provider, how do we protect our leaders and middle managers in our organization from disillusionment and burnout with the current sector? Next question is from Kate Walker. I'm a huge fan of Kate's. Hi, Linda. What kinds of things would you hope to hear from people at Regis in 1 to 2 years' time, considering the imprint you've left on the business and aged care as an industry? What personal or industry successes would you hope to hear have been achieved? And then Corey Fraser, who we gave a shout out to earlier, says, appreciate the shout out, mate. To Linda, 2 questions. Can you point to one thing that convinced you to move to a new industry? Ooh, great question. And the second question is one practice or habit you learned or developed during your time at Regis that you'll be implementing in your new role with your new team.
I hope that's all, Anthony, because that's 4 things you asked me to remember. Okay. So I think in terms of protecting leaders in this sector, the biggest thing for me is still within our own organisations, we have to provide as much psychosocial safety as we can possibly build into every system and every process. And for me, transparency has to be key to that. So we want people to keep reporting when things go wrong or the near misses so that we can keep improving. So I think from boards down, that culture around transparency, curiosity and improvement is probably the most important thing that we can do. And then those of us who are able to advocate for better settings, and the system changes need to keep doing that. And, I would suggest that this goes much broader than the aged care system. I would love for more people to be looking into our system and saying, actually, we do need to provide a better system for the people who work in it too. So that's, thank you very much, Kim. And then for Kate, also a big fan of Kate, not surprisingly, she does work for Regis. So I think the big things, and Kate, if I start in your area, so one of the things I am most proud of is the work that we've done around people safety at Regis. So our claims lost time injury rate is sub 6 per 1 million hours worked against a sector average of 24. Wow. My husband was almost killed in a workplace accident when he was 21 years old. So it's something I've always prioritised. It's got to be an absolute basic. People need to be safe at work. I think if I look back on Regis in 1 to 2 years' time, I'm really very excited about the future for Regis. I look at the work that we've done under some duress, when you go back over the Royal Commission, COVID, floods, bushfires, new act, new funding model. We have introduced or replaced, all of the systems. We've really built it and we've been on this growth pathway. What I would love to see in a couple of years' time is that actually Regis has continued growing and that great providers have also continued growing. Because, it is, I get a real sense of this sector. We're so fragmented, there's plenty of space for everybody, and we want really great aged care in this country. So let's, kind of help everybody lift in terms of the standards. So that would be my answer to Kate. And then for Corey, so I actually, so I've been saying this to people all the time, I wasn't looking for a new job. So this came completely out of the blue, and I'm just as surprised as everybody else is, to be frank, that I'm actually leaving and moving to a different sector. But when I look, so I'm moving to the funeral sector. Some people call it death care. But one of the things, as I reflected back on my career, my first job in health was in palliative care policy. And then I moved I moved into hospitals which provide a lot of care around dying and death. I ran women's and newborn services. So you deal with miscarriages, stillbirths, neonatal loss. I ran a neonatal intensive care unit, and not all of those compromised babies survive. I also ran mental health services. So, you know, a lot around suicide and the burden of mental illness. And then I moved into aged care. And we are usually the last place that people come to before they die. And I think for me, Australia hasn't been very good at talking about death and planning for death. I've always believed very strongly that you can have a good death with planning, and we need to understand what people's preferences are and to give them the kind of death that they want if we can. And I think the other thing I've really reflected on in that industry is, again, salt of the earth people wanting to make things better for that family that's in front of them. And
Can I ask you?
Oh,
yes, sorry, Linda. No, just when you were talking about death and finality, it made me think about the fact that you've really lived for a cause larger than your life. I can see that thematically, you know, going into the areas where it affects people's life span and livelihood. When you think about legacy, you know, you're going through these different chapters and seasons. What sort of legacy would you like to leave?
Yeah, interesting question, right? Because I'm not into legacy, which I know is a weird kind of answer, but I just do the best that I can every day. I don't think about leaving a legacy. So I think about leaving a business and people in the best shape that they can be. I'm far, far less interested in my legacy. So I'm sorry, I know that's a bit of a non-answer.
No, that's a fair answer, because I used to think about leaving a legacy all the time when I wasn't doing anything with my life. And once I got into aged care, I was too busy doing stuff, and I don't care what legacy I'm leaving. I'm just having fun.
And if you can have fun along the way, I know you were answering Corey's question. It just sort of jumped out. I was thinking about legacy, but your new role and your new team was the question. What have you learnt from your time at maybe throughout your careers too, Mercy and the various organisations you've been involved in? What are those? You know, the culture, and you've talked about systems right throughout the whole interview. System for culture, for building people and empowering people.
Yeah, so I'm a really big believer. A consumer of whatever type, their experience of our business is through the hands of the person in front of them. That is their whole experience of Regis. So it doesn't matter what we're doing at a corporate level. The experience is at a very local level. So my view then is our job as leaders is to make that frontline interaction the best that it can be and as smooth as it can be. That's actually our jobs, is to create the culture, the systems and the processes for the people delivering that frontline care and receiving that frontline care. And I think that is something that I will take into my new role as well.
When you look at death and the death industry, status quo right now, what are you excited about in terms of the opportunities that lay ahead of you?
So one of the things I'm really excited about, and I probably have got this mostly from aged care, most people live a long, good life to be celebrated.
Yes.
And, you know, the industry has often been about mourning and grief, which is obviously still really important, but the celebration component for a life lived well is so important. And you do see that beautifully in aged care.
It's funny you said exactly that, because my question was going to be, do you believe that we should celebrate our life? Yes. So I love your thinking on that, because it doesn't have to be solemn. It can be this great moment to honour someone who lived life well. And if you were to think about that, how would you like to see life celebrated?
So I went to a beautiful celebration of life recently, and it was for one of our old executives from Regis who very sadly died in January. And so I went to the celebration, which was in a pub, and his ashes were on the bar with a photograph of him and a rose. And as I walked in, his sister said to me, "Hey, Linda, Max is over there on the bar. Go and say hi." And I did. So I went and I had a chat to Max, who was sitting on the bar. And the speeches, again, there were tears, there was laughter. They played all of his favourite music. By the end, the nieces and nephews and the family, they were dancing. That was beautiful. Like, it was really beautiful and very, very authentic. And I've also been to beautiful religious funerals. And I think it's, you want to have that breadth of services and offerings that are authentic to the person. And we are really diverse. So making sure that, people can personalise it.
We're wrapping up soon. And I want to ask you, it's time to give some shout outs to those who, outside of Regis, because, you could basically name every single person in the organization who's helped shape you, but outside of Regis, who has shaped your career, and who do you think will be shaping the industry in the coming years? Like, what have you seen in the sector, and who's doing some awesome things?
Yeah, so I have been the beneficiary of lots of unsolicited and solicited career advice, and they have been equally useful. There's something to be said for the people who are watching you and have a view. Always listen to those views. People can see something in you that you don't know is there. I think I probably said to you before, Anthony, I've never had a career plan. I had no idea I'd be a CEO. I didn't come in with a plan to be a CEO. And it's only when someone says, like, I've been watching you and I think you've got skills in this particular area, that's gold. And it's often unsolicited advice. So listen to that. So there are lots of people outside the sector who I just find enormously helpful. I'm part of a CEO circle. So, and they're people, none of them are from aged care, and their counsel and their support, especially during those years we just talked about, where they would sit there, every single one of them, saying, God, I thought I had pressure points. And one of them eventually said, Linda, I feel like the man with no shoes complaining to the man with no feet. Like, what you guys are dealing with is just extraordinary. Yeah. So, you get a lot of validation as well as challenge talking to people outside the industry. I think this industry has got leaders in abundance. Absolute abundance. So you can see the people who are going to be shaping the industry, and there will be people who come in over the next couple of years who will shape it as well. I think the big thing for me is making sure that we can hear all of those voices, again, that we get the breadth and depth of aged care. One of the things that we did a few years ago that I think was pivotal was getting to a single peak body representing body rather than the division. There is so much strength in all coming together, and in the end we are all for purpose businesses, regardless of whether we pay tax or not. We're all here for a common purpose. Let's work together with those strengths to make the system better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I hope you keep continuing to watch the industry, and any advice from you to me anytime you want won't be unsolicited. Please do continue.
I love that, man. Well, Linda, you didn't inherit a quiet company in a stable industry. You certainly chose the hardest version of the job, and you're still choosing it. So if that's not the hallmarks of a pioneer in aged care, to support Ant's great and fantastic work, I don't know what is. So well done, and I can tell you, you are an inspiration to a lot of those emerging leaders and existing CEOs. So thank you for contributing to what we would all hope would be a longer stint, but 7 years is a very long and drawn out, high pressure role of a CEO. I can tell you that. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And Linda, we do want to ask you, you've got a current director role at Ageing Australia. Are you planning to maintain your connection with this industry you know and love?
I am going to maintain a connection, but not as a director of Ageing Australia. I think it would be selfish to block that role. And I think it's really important that somebody else in the sector gets a seat at that table. But yes, I'll definitely be maintaining connections.
I'm hoping Linda will be my +1 at the Sydney National Conference, so we can go on the dance floor again. Thank you, guys.
I'm way too sensible to dance.
That's not what I saw last year. Owen, do you want to play us out?
Yes. So thank you again, Linda, for the life that you are living to the fullest. Thank you for the way that you've sacrificed so much to serve so many people in this great industry. And as we always say, all for one and one for all things aged care.
See you guys.
Raise the roof for Linda Mellors. Thank you, Linda.